webinar yesterday. Today, we have our second webinar. Why do central banks need high-quality granular remittances data? The case for the collection, but also the analysis of transactional level, supply-side data and remittances. Supply-side remittances data has the power to not only inform financial policy, but also to support broader economic development goals by informing migration, education, financial integrity, or foreign and broad economic policy choices. In today's webinar, we are going to observe examples of central bank systems to capture, but also to analyze these remittances data, the potential insights that could be generated in, and how this can be used for policy making and for informing the private sector to provide product development. I have the pleasure to have the Central Bank of Mexico. As you all know, Mexico is the second largest recipient of remittances in the world after India. And in 2021, they increased the remittances received by 25% compared to the previous year. Mexicans living abroad have sent home 44 billion over the last year. And that is the same amount received by the whole sub-Saharan Africa. So you can imagine the importance of that. Also, we have here the South African Reserve Bank, which collects detailed transaction level data, but also with a gender component. And also they're going to talk about this. We also have here Central Bank of Spain. So in 2020, the population in Spain was over 47 billion, and 11% were migrants. And we all know that in 2014, Spain moved from the ITRS to a system of systems because of the European Union. So also Central Bank of Spain is going to share. And finally, we also have a regional remittances service provider that uses this transactional data for analysis and for product development. But before, let me share the detailed agenda for today. So first, I will share some logistics for the new participants. Then my colleague from UNCDF will share a few insights from the tool that we have published, the case for the collection and analysis of transaction level data. And after the presentation, we will open the panel of the 4 representatives. And finally, at 9:10, well, we'll have some time for questions. And at 9:10, we will close for the webinar. I apologize because we are extending a little bit, 10 minutes, the webinar due to yesterday. We will be sure that we have the time for your questions. So we have a really exciting webinar ahead of us. So let's start. But also let me provide 3 logistic items for those who not participated yesterday. I really thank you. I see we have already 88 participants. Thank you so much for your time. 1, interpretation is provided in French and Spanish. You can see in the bottom right, the interpretation icon. So you want to use it, please click on interpretation and join the other audio channel. You want to go back to English, just click on English. Second, as I said, ask question, use the chat as much as you could. Please submit your question at any time during the webinar. Plus, please mention your name, your organization, and to whom it is address your questions. We're not gonna open the floor to verbal questions, so please, I really encourage you to use the chat as much as you could. And third, after this webinar, I will share the presentation and the recording to everybody. So briefly, now I would like to introduce my colleagues and today's panelists. I would like to share the bios are on the website. So first, I have Robin Gravestein, UNCDF Lead Systems and Research. Also, we have representative, a partner from the private sector, Saransh Verma, Director of TerraPay. Also, we have Lisbeth Leiva, Manager of the Sector Analysis and Measurement Division from the Central Bank of Mexico, Banco de Mexico. And we have Constance Libusha, Senior Business Analyst from the Financial Surveillance Department of South African Reserve Bank. And finally, Teresa García, Manager of the External Current and Capital Account Unit of the Central Bank of Spain, Banco de España. So now let's welcome Robin for his presentation. Over to you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paloma, and welcome everybody to this panel. Good morning, afternoon, and an evening. So allow me to sort of take a couple of minutes to set the stage for this fantastic set of panelists. Now, we've seen, of course, yesterday as well that remittances, and we know this, are an important and increasing flow for many low and middle income countries, as well as higher level income countries for that matter. And they've exceeded for often for indirect investments and most certainly also official development aid, to name a few. So they're a flow to be reckoned with, if we like. And even the best data sets, the best databases on migration and remittances flows, however, lack some precision, if we like. Often we lack information maybe on who sends it and who receives it, what are the profiles of the senders and recipients. For example, their sex, men, women, or their age, young, old. Also, data is not always reported on a monthly or let's say a real-time basis. We sometimes need to work with market data from what that we get once a year. And very important, and this was highlighted yesterday as well. While we know this data captures the formal remittances markets, it may still ignore informal markets, which can be a sizable flow. Certainly in many of the countries that UNCDF is working in, it will be. So how do we understand at what speed and what pace the market is really developing and what the size of the market really is? How do we, in other words, get to appreciate the impact that remittances can have on, let's say, wider financial inclusion, economic growth, as well as a range of sustainable development goals, women's economic empowerment being, for example, a very prominent one, with the majority of receivers being women. And even when the data is available, let's say it's all at our disposal, it's right there on your laptop, we need to make sure that it's leveraged for product development and policy making fundamentally. Migrant-centric and gender-smart remittance policies and innovations can simply not be made without the use of good data and research. And in this respect, UNCDF has been setting up this working paper with feedback and consultations from many of you on this call having happened on the case of sex disaggregated supply side and remittances data. If we can move to the next slide, Paloma. The purpose of this paper is really to offer central banks and financial regulators, but perhaps also private sector for that matter, a deeper understanding of what the value that disaggregated and transaction level data can offer in understanding remittances market and cross-border transfers at large. And what the paper does, it offers some examples of policy use cases from central banks, including, for example, Central Bank of Mexico, which is on the call, and the South African Reserve Bank, which is also here, really happy they're both here today, as well as some other use cases. UNCDF, in parallel, has also been setting up data collaborations with remittance service providers, including, for example, Terapay, which is also, of course, on this panel today. And so to set the stage for what we'll discuss today, I just want to sort of highlight two examples of what very detailed data can do. Next slide, please. For example, if we capture the very detailed location data of remittance recipients in reporting forms, and often this is anyway in a form when you want to send the remittances, it will be possible to address geographic limitations of service. It can help, for example, to inform a variety of policy interventions, but think, for example, where to open OTC cash out services, or what regulation to make for agents, or banking points for that matter. Also think about how we can improve digital delivery channels themselves. Now here we see a slide of Nepal, and this is based on transaction data of one of the larger providers there. On the left, we see that agents are around 50% of the geographic area that they're able to cover. So they cover 50% of the country. This is an important set of flows for Nepal. It's almost 1/3 of the GDP in this specific country. On the right, however, we see the mobile wallets where they terminate the remittances. And they're almost able to reach the entire country. And perhaps we want to show you this also with a bit of symbolic importance, perhaps. But we were able to discover that around 200 customers were sending or receiving money from Mount Everest National Park. So even in the most mountainous or the most desertous or the most rural place in the world, nowadays people are able to receive digital finance, digital remittances. If we move to the next slide, we see another example of what more granular and more real-time transaction data could perhaps do. One of these things is to measure and monitor the impact of an external shock. So think, for example, a banking crisis, a war, an earthquake, or in this case, what we see here, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Bangladeshi market. And again, this is data from provider from one bank there. And what we've seen here is that COVID-19 lockdowns and pandemic have actually accelerated the shift from cash to digital. So we see in 2019, there's a lot less orange in both of these charts. In 2020, the orange shoots up and the blue diminishes, and that's literally the shift from cash to digital. And it went largely from 1 out of 4 remittances being a digital transfer to almost 3 out of 4 being a digital transfer during the lockdown. And I personally, as well as I suppose many others, didn't expect this to happen at the start of the pandemic, right? In fact, we were worried that remittances would decline, and in this specific market context, it luckily didn't. And digging deeper into this data, we also see that some corridors have digitized faster than others. So, for example, Singapore to Bangladesh digitized faster than Malaysia to Bangladesh or UAE to Bangladesh. So there's also a range of implications there. And perhaps a very important finding is also that we have, not just in Bangladesh, but for many other, we have 10 data sets in total that we're looking at the moment from private sector providers, is that we see that women were much less likely to onboard on the digital remittances than men were. And globally, let's say 3 out of 10 remittance receivers, digital remittance receivers are women. But if you look at most of the markets that we're working with, it's 6 out of 10. So there's still a long way to go there. And there's a bit of a risk that the whole shift from cash to digital may leave women behind, as well as some of the other last mile customers one could think of. For example, people with lower education or lower incomes as well. Now, by capturing and analyzing data related to sex, age, and location of remittance senders and receivers, it's actually possible to support evidence-based policymaking and a more migrant-centric form of product innovation. And with that, I hope to kind of set a bit the stage for this wonderful set of panelists today, consisting indeed of the representatives of the Central Bank of Mexico, South Africa, and Spain, also in the context of the single European payment area, and of course TerraPay as a global remittances payment hub. All of them, I think, will have fantastic examples and experiences of setting up these detailed systems that are very powerful indeed for policy making. In this context, it's really my pleasure to sort of move to the call to Saranj from TerraPay, who's the lead data analytics of this global remittance hub, and they have lots and lots of data. Saranj, over to you.
Thank you, Robin. Hello, everyone, and thanks to UNCDF for providing TerraPay this opportunity. During this session, I'll give you a brief overview about TerraPay as a payments network provider, our footprint, how real-time digital payments networks are helping in capturing a very granular level of data across the globe, give you some insights which have been gleaned from millions of transactions that we process every year, and then the collaboration with UNCDF and a glimpse of the results that collaboration has yielded. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So TerraPay as a payments network provider has a motto that the smallest of payments deserve the same respect, security, and customer centricity as the largest business-to-business payments do in the conventional, sense of the payment services which are provided. And we have one of the many stories that we come across. In the initial days, we got a transaction, which was a very small amount transaction, but it was crucial for someone for sustenance. It was done from Dubai to Tanzania by someone who was support staff at a hotel. And that was crucial to support his family. Now, that sort of data really helps in designing products which are focused for small value remittances. Next slide, please. Yeah. So just to give you an overview about what TerraPay is, we are an interoperable digital payments network, which means that we connect mobile network operators, banks, money transfer operators, etc., to pay out digital payout.
Sharon. Sorry, Sharon,
Yeah.
you are breaking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
back. Yeah.
Okay.
You're back.
So what we do, we only process transactions to mobile wallets and bank accounts. And that really helps in ensuring end-to-end transparency from compliance as well as data collection on consumers. Because cash, of course, has loopholes. Cash payouts have loopholes related to the transaction trails. By definition, a network is successful only if we are able to offer our clients a large footprint. And currently, we are able to source transactions from more than 200 countries and regions and deliver into almost 100 countries. On the left side, on the bottom picture shows the source countries. And as can be predicted, most of the remittances originate from high-income countries generally. And the insight which we get from real-time data here in this picture is not to show that the large amount of transactions are originating, let's say, from the US or continental Europe or Middle East or Australia, but also a lot of intercontinental or intracontinental transactions in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, or in South Asia, for instance. On the destination countries side, if we see this picture shows us where all remittances are getting terminated through TerraPay's network. This is not a global, let's say, a World Bank remittance picture. This is TerraPay specific, and this also is very indicative of how enabling payment instruments such as mobile wallets or real-time bank account transfers help us in delivering and servicing markets which are traditionally underserved. If you see, there are very large pockets of receiver countries on this map in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, etc. While India, of course, is the largest receiver of remittances, as is the global trend. We can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, I'll spend some time on this slide specifically, where the results or the insights from our data have allowed us to design specific products and to work with agencies such as UNCDF in doing research work. In our research, we found that more than 50% of usage, for instance, of the remittances was for food, education, and healthcare. And that helps us to design products which are specific usage-based remittance service, not the generic transaction level service, for instance. We've noticed that wallet transactions, for instance, are lesser than $140 on an average. And if you see the paper that the working paper, it also has evidence and it states that most of the aggregate transaction level reporting or payment services systems are designed for more than $200, because it's not really, from a capital or an effort or time perspective, it might not be easy to scale up bilateral services. What we also see here is that what we have observed is that while the average value would be lesser, 65% of TerraPay's transactions, or more than actually 65, more than 65% of our transactions are wallet transactions. So individual remittances are preferred. Wallet transactions enable real time, as well as they eliminate the pain points of accessing cash, etc. Those have seen significant adoption. And so we design our products for small value but high volumes. Again, on the on-demand scalability front, as Robin was talking about, during COVID-19 and after that, we saw for TerraPay more than 3x increase in year-on-year transactions, which is a very strong indicator of how examples like Bangladesh, etc., where adoption of remittance services has moved from cash towards these digital instruments. I'll talk about the contribution of real-time digital payment instruments towards expanding the fold of formal remittances. Because these remittances are done over instruments which are fully KYC'd, bank accounts as well as wallets, and I mean, we can extend that to other payment instruments which are digital payment instruments. It not only reduces the informal cash-based remittances, but it also gives regulators as well as participants like us a lot more control over AML and combating the financing of terrorism measures. We can do real-time monitoring as well as screening on our transactions. From TerraPay's perspective, we've built in very strong real-time analytics through an in-house system, as well as through a very accomplished machine learning collaborator called Scribble Data. We do our compliance in real time over
Sorry, Saraj, we lost you again.
I mean, now?
Yes, now it's coming back. Okay. Thank you.
I was talking about the compliance. I was talking about how such services, which are the likes of TerraPay, transactions to digital payment instruments in real time help in compliance. We are able to perform real time compliance, as well as we are able to build KYC based profiles for case analysis, which is very important because there could be people using multiple let's say someone is using multiple IDs to transact and do transactions above what would constitute normal thresholds, etc. We are able to use a lot of data points using sender information, their contact details, their KYC details, etc., and build KYC based profiles. We currently have in excess of tens of millions of KYC based profiles where we can identify if someone is trying to send a transaction using, let's say, multiple KYC IDs, and in real time screen those. I'll come to a very recent phenomenon that we have observed. Everybody knows that there's global inflation. What we observed is that on large value transactions to bank accounts, there was a significant decrease in the per transaction amount, whereas in our remittances to wallets, we saw an increase, which indicates that perhaps people are not transacting more on income which is disposable, but only for sustenance, perhaps, or really crucial requirements for remittances. In terms of reporting, this allows us to have sender, receiver, country, currency, payment instrument level granularity across tens of data points in each transaction, and it, as the South African Reserve Bank mandates, we have to provide transaction level reporting to several regulators, and such systems which are designed for on-demand scalability help us in doing that in real time as well as over a period of time. I've come to a significant impact that we have seen, which is delivering more value to end consumer, where the UN SDG goals are that the cost of transaction should be less than 3% by 2030. These transactions on the supply side towards digital payment instruments eliminate the cost of accessing cash, which is someone having to go and access cash at an agent location, etc., as well as the risks associated with it. And you can get access to your funds without having to bother about when the agents are open or how far the agent location, etc., is. In terms of transparency, the end-to-end transparency on the value chain in any digital instrument being transacted over a global network is available right from the remitter to the beneficiary. I mean, we are proud to publish our results on our ability to deliver transactions, such as more than 98% of our wallet transactions are delivered in less than 1 minute. What all of this leads to is not only at at an ongoing level, at a granular level of being able to identify product opportunities, being compliant with regulatory requirements. It also helps when funds are available in formal instruments with recipients, with beneficiaries. It helps in deepening of financial inclusion, because then investment instruments, loans, insurance, etc., are available for them to utilize, whereas compared to cash. So this was some of the insights which we have gleaned and which have helped us in formulating our products, as well as our interactions and collaborations with the regulators and the likes of UNCDF. Next slide, please. Yeah, so before I end, I would like to give a glimpse of the work that we are doing with UNCDF. We have created a dashboard across several, and where we analyze data across several source and sending countries and receiving countries. Here is a glimpse of transactions from 4 source countries which are mentioned, and then 2 countries in ECOWAS, IGAD, and ECCS regions in Africa. And here we see, here using that data, we are able to understand from which corridor level transactions are happening, how many receivers, how many senders, unique senders and receivers are transacting over those corridors. And this we have done over a period of 3 years. As you can see, there has been a significant shift. Like I mentioned, we only do digital transactions, digital to digital instruments. We see a significant shift towards the adoption of digital.
Sorry, Saransh, we lost you again.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not sure why this is happening. Maybe
now you're back.
Yeah. Okay. So these dashboards allow us to identify real-time market growth opportunities, and they also give us patterns around our transaction consumer behavior, as well as overlay them with macroeconomic data for discussions around policy making. We'll be happy to share further results as we work with the UNCDF on this. And thank you, Robin and the team, for giving us this opportunity once again. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Saransh. So now let's move to Lisbeth Leiva from Central Bank of Mexico, who will show us insights into Mexico using state-level data. Over to you, Lisbeth.
Thank you, Paloma. Thank you for having us today. Could you please move to the first slide?
Lisbeth, maybe you can talk closer to the micro.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because for the translators. Yeah, for the translators.
Yeah, okay.
Much better. Thank you.
Thank you. The next, please. Thank you. Well, I will just start by saying that Banco de Mexico, our bank, is compiling and publishing. Then, of course, currently there are various financial institutions, banks, credit unions, post offices, and chain stores that act as for correspondence. For
Please,
money
I really apologize, but I mean, you're breaking. So I don't know, you have like headphones maybe, or?
I'm sorry, I don't have.
Oh, just maybe close.
I'll stop the video and try to talk closer.
Much better.
Better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll start again. Well, Banco de Mexico, as central bank, is the institution in charge of compiling and publishing the funds of payments in Mexico, including remittances flows. Currently, there are various financial institutions that offer international transfer services, like banks, credit unions, post offices, and chain stores that act as independent operators or correspondents for money transfer. In 2002, Banco de Mexico issued a set of rules in order to extract remittances statistics, in particular by creating a national register of companies dedicated to fund transfer services. And the principal purpose was to standardize the information that these companies reported to the central bank on a monthly basis. 10 years later, in 2012, Banco de Mexico issued a new regulation. With this, all companies were instructed to provide additional information that allows to identify other aspects of the new remittance, particularly regional information. I will mention later. I would say that our legal framework is our main tool to be able to measure remittances and have greater data granularity. Of course, we have several areas of opportunity which we are working. Just to mention, even when the channel used to send the remittances mainly electronic, about 99%, we still don't know if it is collected in cash or deposited in a bank account. We must also be prepared for the possibility that unconventional channels, as cryptocurrency, will be used in the future. Not yet, but we cannot rule it out. That is why we are currently talking to the main players in the market to assess whether it is necessary and, more important, possible to modify the rules. Next slide, please. Well, according to this new regulation, companies have to register in the family remittance system, which allows safeguarding the information reports sent by companies and constitutes an international repository. Participants in the fund transfer business have up to 20 calendar days to send the reports of the remittances transferred during the previous month. This report consists of 14 annexes. The information provider is reviewed by the staff, and in case of finding some inconsistencies, flags, or possible outliers or evident errors, each company is required to provide a corresponding information, or if it is necessary, replace the report. If needed, reports are then standardized to the same currency and format. We also measure remittances in cash and kind through a survey of travelers visiting Mexico, but these direct remittances, as we call, accounted for less than 1%. As I mentioned before, most of the transfer is electronic. Finally, all information is aggregated in order to create, validate, and publish the corresponding data table, which occurs about 30 days after the end of the month. So we have 10 natural days to collect, compile, and publish the information. Next slide, please. Banco de Mexico publishes monthly information on remittances, including total income, the number of transactions, and the average remittance. We also have the breakdown in banks and no banks, remittances outflows, and seasonally adjusted figures on the main aggregates. We also publish information about the channels remittances are transferred: money orders, electronic transfer, and cash or kind. We used to have checks, but not anymore. On a quarterly basis, the central bank publishes a broader disaggregation that for inflows includes the breakdown by federal entity and municipality where the remittances is paid. The inflows by country of origin, and in the case of the US, which is the main sender of remittances to Mexico, by state of origin. Unfortunately, we don't have the cross between the municipality in Mexico and the state in the US. Regarding the outflows, we publish data by country of destination. Next slide, please. Although remittance income in Mexico has had a persistent growth since 2014, the resilience shown by remittances in the context of the pandemic has stand out, of course, and for us. Mexico, as well as other countries, has reached remarkable levels in secondary income during the last years. As Paloma mentioned before, income grew 11% in 2020 and 27%. According to the World Bank's estimation, Mexico became the second during 2021 when it surpassed China. However, as percentage of the GDP, that year Mexico ranked 63rd place, but the remittance flows are very important. In 2021, flows were higher than FDI and the income for oil exports. Please, next slide. For us, availability of information allowed for a better understanding of the current trends on flows, helping develop broader analysis of key drivers. During 2020, around 95% of remittances came from the US, a country where nearly 37 million people identified as Mexican. The most important states in terms of remittances were the same with the highest population of Mexico, California and Texas. Jointly, these both states accounted for nearly 50% of the remittances coming from the US in 2020. Next slide, please. In that sense, as far as we have seen, the evolution and resilience of the remittances during the pandemic could have been affected by many factors. Some of them being the relative development of employment in the states of the US where Mexican population is concentrated, as well as the fiscal stimulus in that country to face the crisis. The best example was the unemployment benefits in the US, including for workers who are not normally eligible for that benefit, like independent workers and in some cases, undocumented migrant workers. But there were several additional programs, included aid to low-income families with children, no matter their migrant status. Of course, there are some other idiosyncratic aspects. The pandemic crisis affected the lower income population in Mexico, and given this, the relatives in the US increased their support. There are also new migratory flows from Mexico to the US that have occurred in recent years, and they could explain a part of this growth. And yes, series complex and multifactorial phenomenon. I'll stop here. Thank you, and over to you, Paloma.
Thank you so much, Lisbeth. And I encourage everybody, I see we have 117 participants. I encourage to put your questions for Lisbeth in the chat. And now let's move to Constance Libusha from the South African Reserve Bank. I know we have a recipient, now we have a sender, one of the main senders in the South to South corridor, who will show us insights into South African Reserve Bank platform to measure and analyze remittances data using sex-segregated. Welcome, Constance.
Thank you so much, Paloma, and I'm very delighted to be in this panel and sharing with the world what we're doing in the South African Reserve Bank, specifically also looking at the sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm going to be talking on implementing transaction level remittances reporting and analysis system using gender segregated data. Next slide. I'll quickly touch on just the overview of the reporting system that we use in the SAB and the kind of information that we get out of the reporting system, some initiatives that we're doing with the SADC regions, as well as the formal values. I think this is what we were actually discussing earlier on, to say that there are values and volumes out of South Africa based on gender. Next slide. So in the SAB, or South African Reserve Bank, we investigated for quite a while, as we started by using the paper-based kind of systems. But in 2001, we launched our very first reporting system, which was followed by an improvement of that, which is Bobcast 2 and Bobcat. And then the latest version, which is version 3, was launched in 2013, where we actually expect the reporting entities, which is the banks and the non-banks, to open up their accounting system and provide us with information on transaction level and according to the schema requirements that we normally discuss with them. I think Terapay or Sandrash also mentioned the fact that we do need that information on granular level or on transaction level, because there is a lot of analytics that we actually carry out of that information. So from the data schema, if you're looking at the diagram that I have here, from the data schema, the files, the STPs, so we do use straight-through processing to our data exchange model, and which relay the information into our FRS. This FRS, we also called it Financial Surveillance Reporting System, as the name that we gave to our system. We actually it's our core system that actually feeds the information into obviously our BI tool, also feeds into all our peripheral systems, so other systems that actually need or uses this kind of information. And it is through the use of the balance of payments code, which is also known as purpose codes. Terapay will be very familiar with this, that we use or we expect the transaction to come through via it must be a grouped code, because we want to know whether the transaction was sent through, was it a gift, is it maintenance, is it a foreign contractor maybe sending money home. Those are the kind of things that we actually look for. And if you look at the diagram that I have here, you realize that we sort of we don't expect any manual capturing or any manual intervention on our processes from our reporting entities. They design the system in a way that we specify, and we receive that data, because we don't want any interruptions in the middle. We don't want any changing of figures and data, that kind of data, before we actually receive that information. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. So from the overview of the reporting system, the biggest question that people actually ask is, what is the information what is the reported information used for? Why do we insist, or why do our regulation actually requires that our banks and non-banks actually report those transaction information? It's mostly used, obviously, for our statistics and research department. They use this as part of the BOP compilation. So they use, obviously, they have many versions or many sources of the BOP compilation, and this is one of them. We also provide information to our Financial Intelligence Center, the National Treasury, as well as SARS. Mostly for SARS, this is for customs related. So we do comparison with what the goods that we get into the country versus the money that actually went out of the country. And then we also use it for surveillance of the illicit financial flows. We also try to use this for risk management. We have recently started basing all our processes using the risk-based approach, where we look at where the most risk lies and where we need to focus our energy on. We also we're also using this information for planning and policy formulation, because obviously it as you get this transaction or this kind of information, when we analyze it, that's where we actually can actually take certain policy decision based on that, because it actually tells us, most of this information tells us a story. And I think lastly, it's for the purposes of financial inclusion, our financial inclusion strategy, which is also for remittances purposes. Then the next slide. Okay, over here, I actually just got some information or some statistics on the volumes and the values of the outflow of information from South Africa. If you look closely, you'll see that the biggest country that, or people that actually send information out of the country goes to Zimbabwe, and then followed by, in this case, Eswatini, and then Malawi, and then the countries follows. Those are in volumes wise. But when it comes to values, it's also the biggest country is still Zimbabwe, and then followed by Eswatini, and then Malawi and Lesotho. But we do obviously expect such thing, because we have a whole lot of a migrant population or migrant workers in our country working in the mines and the likes. And then on the right diagram, you will see that here it's actually grouped according to the remittances are grouped according to the women. So how many women actually do this kind of remittances? Number one will still be, it's actually Mozambique. And then it's followed by, I think 42% is followed by Lesotho. And then then Zimbabwe, and then 17% is actually Malawi. I think I skipped 36%, which is actually Eswatini. So you'll see that there's a bit of a difference here, because when we look at volumes and values, you see that Zimbabwe is the biggest, but when it comes to gender, it's more males who are actually sending money to Zimbabwe than females. So I think I felt like would be interesting to see. Yeah. Then the next slide. So in the SADC region, or Southern African Development Community, we ran a few initiatives led by South Africa. One of them we call it SADC reporting system. This is the same reporting system that I just gave you an overview on, which we assist our sister countries to actually implement a similar system, because I think we assisted them before. Some of them are running maybe a previous version that we have developed before. Some of them are still on paper-based. So we actually assist them with implementing this kind of systems. As you can see that there is a lot of sharing, or there's a lot of transaction that goes into that country. So it's also very interesting, or we also want to see from their country's perspective, they also want to see where the most information, or where the most outflows comes from, and where most of the inflows come from. So we have core reporting system, and currently we are running a project with Eswatini. We are going to implementation somewhere at the end of the year. We have done already, we have run a project with Lesotho. We completed it last year. We have run one with Namibia. They're all in the system already. We've been out of the CMA and into the SADC, and we've done the reporting system with Malawi as well. We have a few countries, obviously, that have already requested, or they have an interest in this reporting system, and it's all based on actually maybe who asked first, and who the governor has actually asked us to assist based on who actually approached him first. The next one is SADC BOP harmonization of codes. As I've mentioned previously, our system uses a purpose code. So we want to know whether the inflow, the outflow is it mainly gifts? Is it maintenance? What was the purpose of these codes? So what the SADC as a region has decided to do is that if that we do a harmonization of codes, kind of a project in which if I receive if in the sub in South Africa we have a 401, we have maybe 45% of the transaction are 401 codes. 401 codes must be 401 codes, the same code in another SADC countries, because that actually also assists us in harmonizing the way the information, the transaction flows and the money flows in the region. Okay, and I also just included the map just for the fellow attendees who maybe might not be familiar with where, when we refer to the SADC regions, which countries are we referring to. I think it's the ones in the dark blue down here: Angola, Botswana, Comoros, DRC, Eswatini, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi. We have Mauritius, Mozambique, Namibia, Seychelles, South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Okay, next slide. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Constance. And this is perfect, your last slide for introducing our next panelist. So we have also here Maria Teresa. Oops, sorry. I just finger, yeah. So we have Maria Teresa. So sorry, yeah, from the Banco de España. So she's been working in the Banco de España since 1995, and she's currently the manager for the external current and capital account unit of the balance of payments and financial accounts. She's going to talk about how central bank is moving from having an ITRS to a more harmonized way being in the European Union. So over to you, Teresa. You're mute, Teresa.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Paloma. For me, it is a pleasure to be here representing Banco de España, so thanks a lot for the webinar organization invitation. Next, I will give you a brief overview of our experience in compiling the workers' remittances item of the Spanish balance of payments. And with this purpose, these are the main points of my presentation. First, I will show you which is the role of Spain in the remittances global context. Second, I will outline the main features of the Spanish balance of payments information system. And finally, I want to highlight some remarks that, according to our experience, are fundamental. Next slide, please. Well, the first thing to outline is that Spain is a net sender of remittances. In our case, foreign-born residents amount for the 15% of total residents in Spain, and the ratio of immigrants to emigrants is equal more or less to 350%. The second important thing as concerns our transfers is that Latin America is our main counterpart. In terms of resident foreign-born population, Latin America represents more than 40% of the total. And in terms of BOP debits, more than 50% of the total. Next slide, please. Moving now to the balance of payments information system. The first aspect I want to highlight is that in the year 2014, two important events happened. On the one hand, the full implementation of the single European payments area. And on the other hand, the implementation at European level in a coordinated manner of the 6th edition of the Balance of Payments Manual of the International Monetary Fund. Because of these two events, in 2014, our information system for the estimation of the balance of payments changed completely. Until that year, it consisted of an international transaction reporting system, and both data were compiled according to the 5th edition of the IMF manual. And from that year onwards, we rely in a system of subsystem. This is, our system is based on different data sources depending on the item of the BOP. And also from 2014 onwards, the balance of payments and international investment position, of course, data are compiled according to the 6th edition of the International Monetary Fund Manual. Next slide, please. Yeah. With this slide, what I want to illustrate is that the changeover that took place in 2014, it was not from one day to another. It was a gradual process because difficulties, and you can see some examples on the slide, grew as the European integration process progressed, until finally that we had to abandon the ITRS because the statistical concept for the external transactions was not available anymore. And this disappearance of the statistical concept was due to the reason that transactions within the community should have the same cost as domestic ones. So banks were not able anymore to give us the information that we required without additional cost. So we lost a very important piece of information, and we had to abandon the previous system. Next slide, please. As regards remittances, this type of transactions, given that usually are related to small amount transfers, were initially estimated as a percentage of the transactions below the declaration thresholds. At the beginning, this threshold was of 3,000 euros, okay? This estimation method had to be reconsidered as the ITRS thresholds increased, and they increased because the need of integrating payment markets. At that moment, the available evidence showed that according to the population indicators, the balance of payments debits of workers' remittances were being underestimated, while credits, on the contrary, seemed to be overestimated. For that reason, we started using money transfer operators' data. And we use, until now, this source of information directly for the estimation of the debits and combined with demography indicators for the estimation of the credits. Next slide, please. Finally, here you can see some remarks which, according to Spanish experience, we consider very important in this process. First is that integration processes hamper the availability of granular data for the household sector, at least the availability of such type of data from settlement or payment systems in an automated way. Second is that in this context, the combination of sources of information is crucial. And finally, third is that cooperation with other national or international agencies is also very important. And here I would like to outline and remark the role that international organizations had. And I think that's all for my part. Next slide. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have found this information useful. And I will be happy, of course, to answer whatever question you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Now I would like to take part the questions and answers. I see so many questions in the chat. I'm going to give some time for questions for Constance and Teresa, and so maybe we can start with the ones for Sarans. I see many for Sarans, a lot of questions from Sarans. So one from the Central Bank of El Salvador, Sarans, they're asking, in which countries in Latin America do you have presence? And also there's a lot of central banks asking about which tools do you have, which Power BIs do you have for this analysis? And you can briefly share. So maybe those questions, Sharon, so I have more time to look at the question. Over to you, Sharon.
Sure, I'll just very briefly answer on our footprint. The full footprint of where we are present is available on terrapay.com. We have presence in Colombia, Chile, several countries, Brazil. We are building up our presence in Mexico. So we are partnering with institutions who are present across Latin America. And so we are present in Haiti, several of those countries. You can get the full list on terrapay.com. As I mentioned, we are present globally in terms of payouts in close to 100 countries. And in terms of Terrapay is not a, just to clarify, Terrapay is not a direct to consumer brand. We partner with institutions like the likes of money transfer operators, large ones like Western Union, RIA, etc. And then we partner with, for payouts for banks, we partner with large banks, wallet operators like Movi in Colombia, etc., Redimento in Brazil, etc., for payouts. So that is how we build our footprint. And those are the consumer-facing institutions through which we through which we enable cross-border remittances.
Thank you, Sharon.
On the BI and the systems part, as I mentioned, we have an in-house analytics function where we use several tools, including open source tools. Our in-house, most of the technology that we built is in-house technology, and we also work with a machine learning, machine learning experts. We collaborate with an organization, with a company called Scribble Data, who helps us in our advanced analytics.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. So maybe also I see a lot of questions for Lisbeth for Banco de Mexico. So maybe Lisbeth, can you give us some examples on how Banco de Mexico uses the remittances data? Does the data impact policy? And maybe also you can give some idea, you have data, how much are cash pickup versus bank or wallet deposits in remittances in Mexico's cash versus digital? Over to you, Lisbeth.
Thank you. Related to some examples of how Banco de Mexico uses data impact policy, as I showed in the last slides, analysis have been made crossing information and the population of Mexicans in the US to understand the evolution of remittances. Also, analyses have been made of how remittances have contributed to economic growth and recently to the recovery from the pandemic crisis, especially the consumption, both at aggregate level and regional level, showing that for lower income regions, remittances represent a substantial part of family. Also, migration and remittance studies have also been carried out. And recently, the regional information on remittances was crossed with the banking structure to identify the regions where there are no branches. This information was given to the government, and there is currently a project in branches of a development bank managed by the government where remittances can be collected. So I would say yes, the daily information use public policy. The question about cash and pickup versus back or wallet deposits, as I mentioned at the beginning, we know the channel used to send remittances, but know how it is collected. It's something we are working on to evaluate if we can report. There was another question, had trouble capturing the state of the US. Well, since sending is mostly electronic, companies can identify the state originates without problem. So no, we have not had problems collecting information.
Thank you, Lisbeth. So looking at the questions at the chat, so many questions. So maybe for Constance, there was a lot of interest about how is the South African Reserve Bank capturing the gender component. So maybe Constance, if you can share with us, how do you capture if it's female or male, given all the maybe data privacy and everything? And also, how are you planning to use this information for policy making? Thank you, Constance.
Okay, I think we always ask for a proof of identification whenever a client or somebody is going to a bank or a non-bank to actually send information. So with that, we're able to actually determine whether we are dealing gender-wise, whether we're dealing with is it a male or a female based on the ID numbers that we get through. Part of the policies was that remittances needs to be addressing the issue of financial inclusion. I think we have also heard from Therapy to say that we're trying to get people to actually stop using maybe cash, because we find that most of the time it's not very reliable, and we want people to actually use these mediums. So we actually have reduced the number of requirements or things that we require whenever a person wants to send money. And we don't, if when person is receiving money, I think the only thing that is required is only an ID or an identification. We are in a process of also expanding our the way we collect our information with our OneFinServe program. Unfortunately, the time that we had for presentation was quite short, so I could not really include or expand a whole lot more on that. With our OneFinServe program, this is the kind of a program that will actually also allow you to allow obviously our banks or our non-banks to actually expand the kind of information that we ask for if the information is available, but also taking into consideration the issues of financial inclusion, so that we don't ask for too many things and then exclude certain kind of population. Thanks.
Thank you, Constance. There's a lot of questions also encouraging more data to be published and collaboration. So maybe Maria Teresa, you can share maybe central bank, main role of the central bank is convenient, it's collection, but also it's convenient not to focus only in the statistic department. So if you can share maybe how is the level of cooperation of Central Bank of Spain with other departments, your external sector, and also bilateral contacts with another counterparts in the European Union, the importance of maybe exchanging minor data, remittances population, if you can share some of the Central Bank of experience being into the European Union. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, inside the Central Bank, the production of statistics and the analysis and research are in different departments. And this, I want to highlight that it is something required by the quality guidelines. I mean, in order to ensure quality of the statistics, it is encouraged that the production is in one department and then analysis and research are in a different department, okay? So how do we collaborate? We collaborate precisely in this field of remittances. I mean, we share with them, of course, the statistical data that we produce, of course, external sector statistics, and specifically as concerns remittances, the product of our colleagues that pays special attention on this data is a Latin America report, okay, precisely because of our population resident in Spain. They have twice a year, they publish a report on Latin America, because the interest of Spain in that region of the world, of course. And I would say that this is the report where remittances are given more importance because of the impact that remittances from Spain have in the disposable income of households living in Latin America. Yeah, that as concerns the users inside the bank. Outside the bank, first, and the first contact important for us is the National Statistics Office, okay? We cooperate with them continuously, not only with the National Accounts Department, but also with other departments. And in this field of remittances, the cooperation is fundamental in the field of population and demography indicators. Our data from money transfer operators do not provide us information on gender, age, or whatever characteristics of the senders, but we analyze indeed this information from the statistics that the National Statistics Office produce. So we use this data to check the quality of our estimates. For instance, remittances per capita is a data that we always follow, so not to depart from a certain level, okay? So these additional indicators are fundamental for checking the quality of POP data to see if they are coherent with the data or the information available on the population. As regards other institutions outside the bank and outside of Spain, first of all is our cooperation with CEMLA, with the Latin America Central Organization of National Central Banks. I'm sure that my colleague from Mexico knows perfectly CEMLA. Maybe I have coincided with her in some previous meetings. We have a long and continuous cooperation with CEMLA since a lot of years ago. Once a year, we share seminars with them. This working group also enables meeting each other and, for instance, with Colombia, with Ecuador, and with our main counterparts, Venezuela, we have contact continuously in order, again, to check the quality of the estimates. We share of information with them, and they share the estimates with us. So we are able, for instance, this is very important in order to calibrate the importance of informal channels, okay? Given that you cannot observe informal channels, what we do is to erase, to gross up the data of money transfer operators, assuming a certain percentage of informal channels. And in this way, by means of contacts with main countries of receiving money from Spain, we are able to graduate this elevation ratio that we use. So I don't know if these examples are enough or...
No, that is fantastic, Teresa. Thank you so much, because also you, Constance, and also Lisbeth, all the panelists mentioned the importance of exchanging learnings from the central banks and capacity building. So over to you, Robin, for the closing remarks. We have so many questions from Central Bank of Colombia, Central Bank of South Sudan. I promise we have all of them, and we will respond in bilateral emails. And there are a lot of interest and a lot of good questions that I apologize because we're not taking, but over to you, Robin, for 1 minute closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. So it's up to me to try to summarize this very interesting set of insights and experiences in 1 minute. But what's very clear is that good policies and good products cannot be made without the good use of data and research. And that it's important to sort of understand the remittances flows more and more as they get digitized, as they grow. And we've seen a lot of use cases for better data, whether it's understanding the size of the market, the Central Bank of Spain was just referring to, both formal and informal, whether it's the impact on wider financial inclusion, something that Saransh was mentioning, whether it's the speed of digitization that's happening at the moment, or as, for example, the Central Bank of Mexico mentioned a policy around branch expansions. AML CFT, we've heard, targeting specific programs for low-income migrants. It's the Central Bank of Mexico. Fascinating examples of what one can do with data, and then I'm not even referring in a whole lot list here to a number of things. For example, regional harmonization, which we've seen both in South Africa and in the European countries as well. So thank you really all for sharing these amazing experiences, and thanks to all panelists, Teresa, Lisbeth, Constance, and Saransh. as well as to the interpreters, of course, for interpreting this once again for us and with us. Tomorrow there will be the third in the series of 3 of the webinars, and tomorrow will be all about how we can leverage technology for better decision making and better remittances coverage. There'll be the Central Bank of Rwanda speaking there. There'll be also 2 technology service providers. So looking forward to that session once again. And for now, I would like to thank everyone for joining this session, and wish you a good morning, good afternoon, or a good evening wherever you are.
Thank you so much. Have a very good day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.